Good evening and welcome everyone to this North Western Area Planning Committee meeting. Today, Wednesday the 16th of June. My name is Councillor Maddie Thompson. I'm chairman of this committee. There are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. The setup of the meeting has been designed to mitigate for COVID, and we ask members to work to the protocols agreed at the council meeting on 29th of April in the interests of member and officer safety. The meeting will be streamed live and recorded, and by being present in the meeting, you're giving your consent to being so recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please hold up your hand or your paddle to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. It actually says here the process this evening will obviously be different, but actually it won't be that different because I'll be inviting members to speak in turn, just like we always do. But I would nevertheless ask and encourage all members to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible, please. When invited to speak, please remain seated, remove your mask, put on your visor and speak clearly. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. I must delete that bit, I've said it. Item 2 is apologies for absence. Ms Casey.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillors Jarvis and Keys.
Thank you. Everyone else is here, I believe. Item 3 is the minutes of the 25th of May 2021. It's recommended that they're approved as a true and accurate record. They are on pages 7 to 10. I so move. Do I have a seconder from someone who is here? Thank you. Can I agree those by assent, members? Does anyone have any matters of accuracy to raise? Okay, lovely, thank you. Moving on then, we have declarations of interest. So I have to read this bit. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. And members are reminded they're also required to disclose any such interests should they become aware if the need arrives through the meeting. So I have Councillor Durham.
Thank you, Chairman. Non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council who are statutory consultees in areas of planning. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. A non-pecuniary as a member of Essex County Council, as they are statutory consultees. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any other hands up, so we'll move on. Item 5 is land opposite 34 Hall Road, Great Totham. Ms Bowles, would you please present the report?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I do have a verbal update. Following on from the members' update, we have received agreement to the pre-commencement conditions, which are conditions 14, 15 and 21 as set out in the members' update. So moving on, planning permission is sought for the erection of 30 dwellings with associated access and landscaping. We've got the location plan, which shows the application site outlined in red and the area of blue, which is within the ownership of the applicant but does not form part of this application. We have the block plan. As you can see, the site is accessed from Hall Road, with the first area of public open space immediately to the west of the access. Plots 1 to 12 are located along the eastern side of the access road, and they're the affordable units. Plots 18 and 19 are also located along the eastern side of the access road. Plots 13 to 17 and 28 are located along the western side of the access road, just north of the first area of public open space. The access road branches off to the west, providing access to plots 29, 30 and continues round in a northwest direction to plots 19 and 28. It continues round in a northwest direction with plots 19 to 28 set around the second area of public open space in a cul-de-sac arrangement. I'm going to go through the elevation, floor and roof plans of all the different house types and the associated outbuildings. So we have plot 1 to 4, which is the one-bed flats, and they are an affordable unit, or affordable units. Apologies. So we've got the elevations, the floor and roof plans, and then the associated outbuilding. We've got plots 5 to 8, which are 2-bed terrace dwellings. Plots 9 to 10, which are semi-detached 3-bed dwellings. And plots 11 to 12, which are semi-detached 2-bed dwellings. Plots 1 to 12 are the affordable units. The remainder of the units are open market dwellings. We've got plot 13, 14, 25 and 26. All the remaining plots, they are intermingled around the site as detailed in the committee report. We've got plots 15 to 17, terrace 3-bed dwellings. Plots 18, 24 and 30, which are detached 4-bed dwellings. Plots 19, 22 and 28, which are detached 4-bed dwellings. Plots 20, 21 and 23, which are detached 4-bed dwellings. Plot 27, which is a detached 4-bed dwelling. And plot 29, which again is a detached 4-bed dwelling. We've then got the proposed street scene elevations. Section AA, which is along the top, is here between these 2 points, which you can see on the map in the corner. Section BB is the view between these 2 points, and section CC is the view between these 2 points. And we've got section DD, which is here, the view from these 2 points. Section EE, which is the view between these 2 points. And section FF, which is the view along the front of the site from Hall Road. And that single-storey dwelling there is an existing neighbouring property. We've then got some site photos. This is looking into the site and out through the access. And then we've got the dwellings which border the site to the west and the east. And then some photos of Hall Road. The application site has previously been subject to an outline application for 30 dwellings, which was refused by the council for one reason relating to the impact of the development on the character and appearance of the area. The decision was subsequently appealed, and the appeal was allowed in March 2017. Although the application has expired, given that there have been no significant changes to the site or surrounding area, it is considered that this historic application carries significant weight as detailed within the committee report. It's pertinent to note that the previous application was allowed at the time when the council contended that it could demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, which went unchallenged by the applicant at that time. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The council and planning inspector have not historically objected to the principle of residential development at the application site, and it's not considered that there are any justifiable reasons to alter this stance. The proposed scheme is largely in line with the illustrative layout submitted at the time of the previous application, which was found to be acceptable by the planning inspector, subject to minor changes which have been addressed within this proposal. I have got a comparison with the 2016 indicative layout this side and the proposed scheme this side. The appearance, layout and scale of the scheme are considered to be of an acceptable quality which assimilates into the settlement and be immediately adjacent to the western boundary of the application site. In addition, no concerns in relation to the impact upon residential amenity are raised. The applicant has agreed to the planning obligations set out in Section 8 of the report, and should the application be approved, these will be secured via a legal agreement. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval, subject to securing the planning obligations and the conditions set out within the members' update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, could we get the clock up, please, Ms. Burnett? Ms. Kane? Could we get... Ah, you're doing it. Thank you. Right, we do have 2 public participants for this application. In line with the participation scheme, I'm going to invite objector, Ms. Sophie Brownsell, to read out her submission. May I remind both of you, I'll do you both together, that you have 2 minutes only for the public speaking in accordance with the scheme, and those who know me know I stop you to the nanosecond just to keep everything fair for everyone. So please do use your microphone. Your 2 minutes starts when you begin to speak, so make sure you're comfortable, and away you go. Thank you.
The infrastructure is not suitable for the additional 90-plus cars. This includes friends, visitors, teenage children that may live there. Traffic is already an issue in the village, and this would cause problems during rush hour. School Road and Hall Road are only country lanes and would not cope with that amount of cars. The playing field and the children's play park leads out onto School Road and would not be safe, therefore, for children to cross. The residents who live on Hall Road have lived there for many years, and their views and quality of life will be disrupted due to the buildings works. The school and doctor's surgeries are already full, and they're fully subscribed, and there is a waiting list. If they need to travel to these outside of the village, it would cause even more traffic. The natural wildlife will be at detriment to the plan to build more houses, and this includes plants and animals of many kinds, some of which are protected. As a mum of 2 small children, I'm very concerned about the level of toxins in the gravel pit. I'm also aware of how any disturbance of the land could release harmful fumes into the area. Many older residents live in this area, and there may be people who have underlying health conditions who cannot be exposed to these fumes. There would be additional pressure on the sewers. This already floods during heavy rains. There are also concerns over flood risks. The plan increases the size of the village beyond its current boundaries, which the village plan proposed sent out in January 21 for residents' consultation and approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfectly timed. Okay, now we have Mr. Ford, who is the agent. Same rules. I know you know them, so I won't go through it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Russell Ford, a Chartered Town Planner and Agent for the application. You have a comprehensive report and it's recommended for approval. Outline planning permission for this same development was allowed on appeal in March 2017. Against legal advice, this council resisted the release of historic covenants, which was subsequently removed by appeal to the Lands Tribunal, a lengthy and expensive process which took nearly 3 years. That is why I submitted a reserved matters application only in February 2020. Your officers declined to register the application and the original permission lapsed. I substituted for a full application shortly thereafter, which is the application before you tonight. It is in all respects reflective of the original outline scheme. It is adjusted only in relation to comments made by the appeal inspector about how it can be improved. Those improvements are present in the current scheme and endorsed by your officers. The application represents sustainable development which has been acknowledged throughout its lifetime and so is supported by the presumption in favour of granting planning permission. Every possible technical question, that is in relation to contamination, flood risk, drainage, landscaping, trees, residential amenity, nature conservation, access and parking, has been asked and answered in this proposal. All the statutory external experts agree and offer no objection subject to conditions. The proposal delivers 30 houses in accordance with demographic need, of which 12 will be affordable. The Council's housing officer supports the proposal. All contributions, that is relating to education, highway improvements, recreational disturbance and public open space, have been updated and will be delivered through a Section 106, which is already drafted. This is a thoroughly scrutinised and well-designed scheme, appropriate housing in the right place, and given the recent lapse in 5-year supply also, although belatedly, at the right time. In these circumstances, there is no reason on earth why you would not support this. Please, please, no more obstacles. Recognise and commend the hard work that has been done, including by your officers and Grant Planning Commission tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Well kind. Thankfully, you didn't fill the 2 hours that's on the clock. Okay. Does anyone, just for simplicity, have any questions of fact to ask planning officers, like sizes and heights, and before we actually debate? Right. So I've got Councillor Morley and Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. It was a landfill site. Have all the relevant checks been carried out on this site? Because I do remember, I think it's about 20 years ago it was last used, but I got a feeling it was only for soil. I don't think it was for waste. Well, I know it wasn't. It was
I believe there has been a contamination report, but I'm going to ask Ms Bowles to elaborate on that.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Our Environmental Health Department and the Environment Agency have both been consulted on this application and looked at the contamination report. There is a few conditions in relation to contamination and remediation, and should any more arise, those conditions should cover any issues that might arise during the construction of the development.
Thank you. And Ms White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. No, I've got some queries really. The first one is under 5.911. There's no mention of a nature matrix being carried out to actually advise on the amount of habitat that's being lost, unless it's just not in the report. The other query I've got is under policy 3, which is shops. Have we got? I'm not familiar with Great Totham South. Are there shops within easy walking distance? It's outside the settlement boundary. S1 with sustainability. Are there lots of local bus stops, shops, doctors, surgeries, everything within walking distance? And the last one is I just wanted to mention that there was an appeal decision recently in my ward in Purley, and that previously had planning application for one house, and admittedly they went in to convert some of the farm buildings to make, I think it was 6. And the planning inspectors put no weight on the appeal decision where it got approved first time around. So just to bear in mind that they do change their minds from time to time.
This is true. Before I go to Ms Bowles, Mr Ford, could you possibly turn your microphone off? Thank you. Ms Bowles, have you any comment to make on that? Or Mr Lee, anybody?
Yep, through you, Chair. With regard to the accessibility of the site, it is within walking distance of a bus stop, which is very close to the site, and I believe there's a post office within walking distance and a recreation ground, so it is considered to be in a sustainable and location which is linked to public facilities.
Okay. Did I see your hand, Councillor Durham?
Yeah, you did, Chairman. Thank you. Chairman, we're here tonight due to a technicality. Otherwise, the work would have already started on this, as we know. And, you know, we're between a bit of a rock and a hard place, and I hear what the lady has said with her objections to it. But we have a previous, in fact, a fairly recent, in this great scheme of things, appeal decision. And the only thing that has actually changed since that appeal decision is at the time that that inspector made that decision, we had a 5-year land supply. Regrettably, now we don't, by a long shot. So actually, we're in a far worse position now than we were defending the appeal back in 2017. So, as I said, we are in rather a difficult situation on this, and I totally take on board the concerns. But the one thing I would like to just clarify, and the officer almost answered it in response to Councillor Morley's question. The previous gravel pit, the
the reclamation scheme was obviously for landfill, but can you just confirm that that landfill was inert waste and building rubble rather than domestic waste?
Ms. Bowles?
Through you, Chair, if you just give me a second,
Of course.
there is a section on that in my report. Yeah, so paragraph...
Was a leading question because I have read it. Yeah.
Yeah, so paragraph 5.10.1 sets out that it was industrial, commercial. It was licensed from 1979 to 1994 to receive industrial, commercial and household waste, described as soil, non-hazardous builders' rubble, soil and excavated material. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Fleming? And then Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just had a question for Ms Bowles. On page 15, 3.1.12, talking about some of the plots, your report details that yellow brick will be used for some of the market housing. Am I to understand that the affordable housing is in red brick? And then also, how does that then square with your comments in 5.3.16? Policy H2 design and appearance of affordable housing is indistinguishable from market housing. Thank you.
Ms. Bowles?
Through you, Chair, I believe there is a range of materials being used on the site. So there's also render and other such materials like that. So it's a mix of materials. It isn't that all the open market houses are in one material and the affordable units are in another. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, I probably will have quite strong feelings about this particular planning application, and I have grave concerns that this application and this site is being built on something that we do not know what is buried in the ground. So until we're really sure, do we really want to take that risk and build houses on land that has been contaminated by, as we've just been told, industrial and building? Do we know whether there's asbestos there or not? So that immediately, before we put a hole in the ground, we should have a really, really strong, rigorous survey on this land before anything actually starts. Now, the interesting thing about our 5-year land supply, the National Policy Framework states that if we've got a 3-year land supply, then our policy and our local development plan still applies. So therefore, this particular site should not be considered because it is outside the settlement boundary and it does have an extreme detrimental effect on the countryside. On the site are lizard orchids, which are a protected plant. So before we do, again, any work on this site, we need to ensure that all the lizards and all those things are, we have a check that those aren't there anymore, or they're moved, or they're protected. Now, I can understand the need for this particular development. I can understand that there is this element that we do need houses. However, I disagree with the applicant because our own housing department says that it does not address the housing mix. So if you look at page 22, 5.2.4, it does not address the housing mix, and the balance is not correct. It is under the amount that we should be allocating to this site. So again, that's a good reason why we should be refusing this application. According to, on page 23, on 5.3, according to our policies S1 and S8, the countryside and the protected for its landscape and natural resources as value as well for its intrinsic character and beauty. So those things are not being addressed by this application. The other thing as well is on page 27, 5.5.7, the rear gardens of plot 25 and 26, which are semi-detached houses, have a severe effect on 8, 7 and 9 millways. And especially 5, 6 and 7, which would directly back onto it. I don't understand, in terms of the design and in terms of the landscaping and the way that this has been designed, why, where we've got these particular houses, and again, we need to look at this before we pass it, why is it that we've got garages next to garages? Surely if we put the garages at the rear of those houses and move those houses to where the garages are, that would then remove that detrimental effect on those particular properties. It says in our report that the distance considered to prevent signals is to light dominating effect and overlooking. So therefore, if we look at D1, we're not protecting the immediate surroundings, we're not protecting accountancy, there is overlooking, there is outlook, it's going to affect the outlook and the light of those particular properties. So if we can change that layout of the houses to the garage, at least if this goes through, we are protecting those houses. The other thing as well, on page 28, under the level of private amenity space, 5.7.2, it does not give enough amenity space. And again, our officers say this in the report, that there is not enough private amenity space. So I would rather see good design and less public space for these particular properties. So it's not good. It's better than it was 50, but it's not done in the right way. So the other thing I really don't understand is if we look at the diagram and we look at page 4 of the report, or we look at the screen, between plot, I think it's 18 and 12, there's a turning point. Now, we've got a design that allows for vehicle access. Why is there a turning point at that particular location, which is just into the site? The only reason that I can see that there is a turning point at that particular location is so that in the future, the people who own this land can have access to the next fields, which are still under protection. So we have to remove that turning point. Those are my points.
Thank you. I think some of those are for you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't actually got a mask, so I'll take it off if no one minds.
Yes, do.
Firstly, my understanding is the relationship to the 3-year land supply relates to neighbourhood plans rather than to us as the district and our LDP, and that's a very big difference because obviously the MPPF is very clear that the loss of a 5-year land supply results in our policies becoming outdated, and as members know, when they're outdated, we are required to deal with planning permissions through the tilted balance, which puts weight in favour automatically of delivering houses. You know, that's why it's called the tilted balance. Basically, the scales that normally are like that are now like this. It's straight away in favour of the applicant. And that is a consideration that we have to give serious weight to as the determining authority. We have to take these things into consideration. On top of that, we need to take into account all the general, normal material considerations that we have to: impact on character of the area, highways, planning history, etc. And as Ms Bowles explained in quite detail, there is a previous outline planning permission granted on this site. There has been a previous permission at a time when we were able to demonstrate a 5-year land supply. So the inspector thought at the time of the balance being balanced, not tilted, that it was acceptable to allow 30 dwellings on this site. And that is a material consideration of significant weight. What weighs even more favour in this application is the fact that we now no longer have a 5-year land supply. And remember, it's at 3.26. It's not even just shy of 5. We are significantly short of having a 5-year land supply. So members really need to be conscious of the principle of this development is something we would be very, very difficult to defend at appeal and put us in a very dangerous position. That would be my advice in relation to matters such as that. To echo what Ms Bowles explained about the contamination issue, there has been reports submitted. They have been found to be acceptable, and we have, though, required a number of conditions that require, I think, slightly a bit of additional information and protecting development during the construction. This is standard planning process. It would not be reasonable to refuse an application because we do not know an entirety of what is under the ground, because we never do. And the conditions and the reports that are submitted should give us as decision makers through the planning process a comfort that there is a certain level of safety involved. And That is the standard acceptance. Anything above that, I think, would be very difficult and put us in a very difficult position if we were looking to refuse it on that. The point about housing mix, I think Ms Bowles covers in the report, and it relates to obviously the history of the site. This was the outline mix that was submitted. It was considered acceptable at the time, whilst the neighbourhood or the local plan has obviously moved forward, and obviously we have got policies that try to deliver the housing mix in accordance with SHMA. It's important to remember that that policy is watered down by the fact we no longer have a tilted, 5-year land supply and the tilted balance. So while the need, the SHMA, the evidence is still material consideration, the use of our policy is not as robust as it has been. So I think that is not forming a reason for refusal in my eyes. The point about the intrinsic character and beauty, my advice is that the inspector have found this site can be developed for dwellings and there won't be a harm or a loss that is of a level that is so detrimental that it results in a reason for refusal. And that was at a time of a 5-year land supply, once again, and we haven't got that. Similar points in relation to garden spaces. Ms Bowles' report obviously explains that there are a number of properties that are slightly smaller than they should be. It's been, officers consider that, taking into account the 5-year land supply, where we are unable to maybe be as picky, for want of a better phrase, than we normally would be in relation to matters such as that. It's not considered to result in a demonstrable harm to such a degree it warrants a reason for refusal. And the points around the turning circles, garages, etc. We're not here to redesign schemes. We're here to determine applications that are submitted to us on whether or not they're acceptable. You may think schemes can be made better, you may think schemes could be improved, but that's not necessarily a reason for refusal just because it's not perfect, for want of a better phrase. If it meets the threshold, which is our LDP policies, if it crosses that line, we need to support the scheme, and officers really don't think there's any objection in design terms. And the fear that a future turning head could allow development in the future is not a material consideration, because that would be an application that would be required and would be assessed on its own merit. So the consideration that a road could in future be used for access isn't a material consideration in termination of the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. You wanted to come back, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. So it's interesting that Mr Lee quotes our LDP and our policies when it suits him, but not things when I'm putting those particular points forward. So can I have can the officers answer this question? Is this a good design, or does your report say that it's not a good design and that there are problems with it?
Through you, Chairman, I don't think you'll ever find...
So does the report stipulate that there are things wrong with this design? Hannah, does it state that?
Is he able to do that?
I was actually addressing Mr Lee with that one.
It's Hannah's report. I'd like to hear from Ms.
Through you, Chairman, I think you'll actually find it's the director's report.
The director's report.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Mr Lee will let Ms Bowles chip in if she feels a need. Would you like to? Work that up between you?
Sorry, Ms Bowles.
Do you want to say something? Oh, I'm happy to. No? Right, I'll pick that up.
Mr.
Through you, Chairman, there are...
Is it a good design? That's my question, yes or no?
Through you, Chairman, that's a subjective opinion. And I can
well, that's what planning is about, though. Planning is about a suggestion. So my subjective question...
Not ping-pong, please.
Through you, Chairman, the planning isn't about subjectivity. It's about determining planning applications in accordance with the LDP unless material considerations indicate otherwise. There are times that matters may be subjective, and design is one of them. And as I explained earlier, just because a design you think could be improved or isn't perfect doesn't automatically mean that warrants a reason for refusal. You need to be able to show demonstrable harm. Okay. But further than that, taking into account the tilted balance, you need to be able to show that the harm from the development is so significant that it outweighs any benefits. Remembering that an inspector has already found on a time when there was no need to evidence that development of this site is acceptable. If members think that the relatively standard design, what we find right across the district, is harmful, that's within their gift. But the point I would raise is that we need to be showing that there is a certain standard of harm that is much higher than before we had the 5-year land supply.
So can I come back, please?
You can, but I must just say, because of the YouTube recording, we can only have one member microphone on at a time, so you do have to...
Yeah. So it's interesting, last week at the full planning committee, we turned down an application due to the same reasons that I'm talking about tonight, in terms of those plots that are affecting the Millway properties, that they are causing demonstrable harm to the properties that are already there, and therefore, yeah, we used that last week in terms of turning down an application. So therefore, I see that we can use the same reasons that in terms of today's application. So there is, we know that there is demonstrable harm to the properties on Millway, and there is loss of light, and there is overlooking. And that is my main reason why I feel that we need to turn this down, because it does not fit our good design policy.
Okay, I actually have Councillor Fleming, then Councillor Durham.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, another question for Ms Bowles. Page 38.3, ECC initially raised an objection. I'd be grateful if Ms Bowles could expand upon that for the committee. Thank you.
Give us a page number, possibly.
30, I think.
Thank you.
Yes.
Through you, Chair. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Through you, Chair. Yeah, the lead local flood authority, they did request additional information and additional reports, which the applicant did submit during the course of the application. There was a bit of back and forth, which is why this application has been so delayed, but the information has been forthcoming. Essex County Council withdrew their objection and have just suggested some conditions.
Yes,
Thank you, Chair. Ms Bowles, do you mind just drilling down on what their concerns were exactly? Thank you. I understand that the applicants submitted reports, but if you could just outline what the concerns were. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I do believe it was the surface water drainage, but I will just double check that to make sure it's correct.
Okay. The thing is, once the flood authority, the lead flood authority has accepted it, they've accepted it.
Through Chairman, can I just comment? To be honest, it is not unusual for Essex County Council's lead flood authority to object or put a holding objection for a little bit of extra information. To be honest, it happens more than it doesn't.
And to be fair, it's better that they put a holding objection that they then remove than not put an objection and wish they had. Councillor Durham?
Yeah, Chairman, I have huge sympathy with Councillor Siddle's points, and I acknowledge the fact that not every aspect of this is perhaps as we would ideally like it. But I think the old adage of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good comes in on this to a certain extent. And, as we've said before, whether we like it or not, there was an appeal decision in favour of this in 2017, very recently, and it only ran out of time by arguably a disagreement, let's call it that, or a misunderstanding. And I think, as I said, I'm afraid I think we're going to have to accept what is in front of us, despite the fact it may not be perfect.
I think, as with all these things, it's a question of degree, isn't it? I mean, do we think it's perfect? No, evidently not.
Very few things are, Chairman.
Very few things are. Could we ask the applicant and Mr Ford to make some minor amendments and come back with them, or make some amendments and come back with them? We certainly can, but he doesn't have to. Well, in the absence of a proposal, unless Councillor Siddle's going to make one, which I thought he was for a moment there, then I don't actually have any recourse other than to put the recommendation, which is to approve subject to the officer's report and the conditions and so on held within that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Morley.
Through you, Chairman, would recommend that was through the members' updates conditions rather than within the officer's report.
This is true. That's right. Thank you. Good point, Mr. Lee. Thank you very much. So we should be looking at conditions in the members' update, which should be available for you. Is there anything you think you should read out or we should hear, Mr. Lee?
Through you,
What's
Chairman,
different?
there's slight tidying up. There was a numerical error in the original report. We've also amended through discussions with Environmental Health and SUDS where some can and can't be pre-commencement, and Mr. Ford, as the agent on behalf of the applicant, has agreed the pre-commencement conditions that are in the update. Thanks,
Okay.
Chairman.
I think we'd better have a show of hands because I suspect this isn't going to be quite by assent. So could we have those in favour of the recommendation? Please show. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5? Those against? Oh, sorry, you don't get a vote if you're not a member. Good try. 1 against and abstentions? Ms. White? Okay, thank you. So that is agreed in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Item 7 is any other items of business the Chairman considers are urgent. There are none. So with thanks to officers, members and everyone else, I close the meeting at 8:12. Thank you. Can you please...